Okay, so guys, my Wi-Fi kind of cut out for a second, and strangely it came back. So if this is, just to be safe, in case this is going to be kind of a separate video, this is the part 2, the continuation of the part 2 of a civilization in transit. And I don't know how far you heard and how far was recorded, but I'm just going to continue. What you live for, the world remembers and eventually will animate. You know, we have to start treating thought not as ourselves. After idol worship, after we tried to make objects into God, we then made subjects into God. And so we are currently in the era of ideal worship, because civilization requires an individual person to be involved. You know, sometimes when I speak, there's a part of me that feels in like 400 years, our minds will seem to have never existed. That means if we were to comprehend the minds that we will have in the years to come, in the many in the centuries to come, it would be one of those situations where it's not just we can't fathom the technology, the state cannot be known. So it's like a limitless phenomena suddenly having limitations, and it wonders why these limitations are here, and it discovers self-conception, yet it discovers within that self-conception there's the conception of the other. There's the conception of the external from the internal. That means if I ask you behind your eyes what there is and in front of your eyes what there is, do they both exist at the same time? We see, yes, we exist as the world is existing. It's like you can't go to someone and be like, yo man, I exist more than you, ha ha ha. You can't compare existence, because we all have the same value as conscious existence, or be as existence being conscious of itself. You see, whatever way you choose to walk up the mountain, it is the same mountain. For the world cannot change in the hindsight of the unknown. It's like change, the concept of change doesn't exist in certain states. That means the concept doesn't exist, doesn't mean change is there. It just means like right now people feel they're just their bodies. But why does the word mind exist in the dictionary? Why? And why do we not know enough about it? Why are we left to ancient traditions, and what is modernity doing? And we see that science pushed society's attention away from developing the stories we tell ourselves to more how matter was shaped. And because I consider a natural intelligence to existence personally, therefore I am not afraid of the future, because it's like your body, you get a cut on your body and it heals. So nature recovers. It doesn't matter how much chaos appears, it recovers. And it doesn't matter how much it recovers, the chaos is given freedom too. It's as if there's a chaotic citizen and an ordered citizen, and they require to live in the same society. It's as if they have no choice. And when they are living there, that means there's various states. Like, for example, when I walk, my work takes me to downtown Toronto, and I see various states of mind walking on the street. It's as if you can just see from how a person walks what kind of life they have lived, how life has brought them. Education, it's as if the person begins to realize when they're in their personal space, their mind doesn't feel a sort of intense pressure of correction. So the person who is free to make mistakes can only be free to succeed. A person whose mind doesn't have is scared of failure, I'm sorry to say, because you're scared of it, it will pull you towards it. Anything you're afraid of, it's not wrong to be afraid, but just fear is a magician. Because when you suddenly look in the hat, the rabbit's not there. When you confront the fear, truth realigns. It's an update. Fear is an update of your intelligence. Even the most chaotic experiences a person goes through, it is an update. And it can be unfortunate and fortunate, but the meaning of the world is in the stories we tell ourselves, and the stories we tell ourselves open up to us. They are, in some sense, society spoon feeds a shitload of ideology. Like, I mean, I should probably choose different wording. Society defines the social entity. And these definitions, unless challenged within you, unless you wonder about it authentically, you wondering about your intelligence before any teacher or teaching, it's like you're alive. What greater phenomena could there be? This is why people who get lost in the kind of teacher-student dynamic, they forget that it's like narcissism at its best. It's like egos trying to be cool, it's like there's too much of nonsense going on. Let's not continue it. For me, I don't care about teachers and students. When I say that, it's not that I don't care for the educational system. I incredibly care about it. It's just that I don't feel those roles are enough. I feel we have to advance communication and open our minds and realize that the most tragic and incredible things that can happen on this planet, they arise in the mind. That means I sat down and I was like, okay, why is there war and why does it happen? And of course, one manner is like, you're like greed, like people are evil, they're animalistic, they haven't evolved to civility, so they like to be violent. Like, so for example, a lot of these common answers come. But the uncommon reason of war, I consider again to be language and to be miscommunication. That means no person is wrong, they're just in different rooms. And if they cannot create a room they can stand in together, then the world is in flames. This is why the United Nations is our first step towards peace. This is why I'm so happy that the United Nations exists now, regardless of how efficiently the United Nations is being run and based on what values and kind of systems of belief. But regardless, the fact that nations care to communicate with one another is an advancement. This is why when we see negotiation to be the most powerful instrument, this is what shyness kind of has. People who are shy are missing out on the incredible levels that how communication can evolve your mind. And communication requires responsibility, and responsibility, if you're being responsible for an illusion, then there's no responsibility. It's like you're living for something you don't care about, so the world feels empty to you. And so that has to be, kept in check. One should never be afraid to reset. So pretty much when the United Nation can become a group of incredibly intelligent and authentic human beings who care for their cultures and nations, trust me, the issue with the world is not that nations are at war. The issue is that, in some sense, war has been considered the best solution. You see, language was so important for me. I have a love and hate relationship with language. I can see how it can be a blindfold, so I don't, it's not that I hate it, I just feel its inefficiency, so it is, what can I say? It's like when there's a better way to walk, walk that way. This is why morality, if it's unauthentic, it will immobilize you. But if your morality is based on how you naturally are and you don't shy away from your own emotional nature, so you can say, it's like you tell me who is stronger. So I'm right now suggesting, like, I'm going to give you two suggestions of two types of, like, let's say we have two people, we have these two men. One of them is, in some sense, a king, let's say, and the other, let's say, is a beggar. We have a beggar and a king, okay? And this king, let's say, is a king who was just given the kingdom by his father and never like was a prince who just had a big ego since childhood and just accepted the greatness that life gave it. And then we have a beggar who also entertains Drake's lyrics that say, started from the bottom, now we're it's like started from the bottom, but now we're still in the bottom. And so we have this beggar who is a person who, because it has the greater levels of that person's desire have been rejected by the world, as if the world doesn't care for their mind. This is why the person has found contentment. This is why you find a unique street smart intelligence and wit in the lower class. The lower class is more savage, the lower class of any nation. This is what I'm saying is a kind of, I hope it universally echoes. But it's this notion that intelligence doesn't have to do with just the instrument that is recording the data. It doesn't have to do with your brain and DNA and genetics. Intelligence is awareness of environment. And true intelligence is awareness of the inner environment, the subjective environment. And so Mr. Within is saying it's not just enough, to just, it's like you can't just be an objectively able being without being subjectively capable. Subjectively, you can only be capable if you're not burdened. You see, there's a weight that the stories of the world create in us when we have to be responsible for our activity. You see, right now, the children, it's kind of like their parents, the children don't realize. All children on this planet, you are being raised in bunkers. What that means is there are worlds beyond your eyes that are being sheltered from you, that are being sheltered by forces, you know? As if like the parent looks at the rating of the DVD and says, go back to sleep, son. And so it's one of those situations where the child's eyes must be protected because the child's eyes must still be given the freedom of its imagination. For example, this is the thing. I think that I noticed that a lot of children, especially in Western cultures, and not just in Western cultures, but a lot of children have invisible friends. And they go to the parent and they're like, Mom, Dad, I have an invisible friend. And like the parents are like, oh, how cute, our kid has conceived a Santa Claus for himself. That's how the parents think. Okay, but to that kid's reality, it still is wondering if its thought is real or not. So the parent has to see how aware the child is to its own thoughts, to what it is saying or what it is doing. It's kind of like that is, to be honest, the only task of the parent. Just open up the eyes of your child, and that's enough. And be honest. Because parents who are trying to be like, this is why for me, if it doesn't matter, I don't consider age to be a factor. I consider truth to be a factor. And truth, as far as it can be shared, must not be hidden. Let me tell you why. Because it's data. Truth is what we see when the blindfolds come off. The blindfold, and the yogic mindset was so profound that, and I don't say it was right, but I'm saying it was profound. It was so deep metaphysically that they saw, in some sense, the world, the objective world, as a simulation of God's kind of inconceivable mind. That means human beings were like, something is moving everything that we can never know. As if we could, beyond the observable universe, poets are dreaming. So the child starts off in an individual reality. And to be honest, it's starting off in a state where there isn't even an individual reality, because the child's attention is going to its inner subjective realm and the objective realm. So it takes a while, and especially a lot of it. I'll tell you this: parents should definitely have their children, in some sense, speak at a young age. Get your children speaking. Get your children comfortable to share their mind with the only world they have, the only world that is waiting for them. You see, that imagine children are born on this planet and they're born into celebrations. That means rather than, it's as if violence has become a forgotten memory. And we are now living in a civilization where we have realized the value of peace, the value of gentleness, not just because, oh, we can all live peacefully, we can all mow our lawns together, Like, no, that's not the world peace I'm speaking about. It is a sort of allowance, it's a space. It's kind of a space. It's as if, like, imagine this village under siege. And eventually, the administrators of the village, a group of them, go defend the wall, and then another group evacuate the village. Okay, evacuate the human life from the chaos, And so we see, in one manner, there is like sheltering from the storm. Trust me, there's so many great human beings, both in history, you can just go check it in history books, and even now alive currently, where they are like giants. It's as if they saw a chaotic world and they're like, how dare the, chaos not listen to the order. For the order is not a fascist abstraction. It's not a fascist ambition. It's not just like, my world has to be all worlds. That's the issue. That's the issue with ideological worship that is occurring in the civilization of ours. You see, I'm starting to notice this. This is why it's, how can I tell you? It's as if, like, this, as hard as it is to speak about how the brain functions, it is also complex to speak about how society functions. And in certain writings of mine, and in certain of these lectures, I trust me, some ideas are so important to me that they have to be shared. I mean, why, there's this very incredible poetic imagery that is found in this mystical poet named Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi, this ancient Persian poet. And when I look at, I saw this show called Shahs of Sunset, and I was like, because I was born in Iran, Persia is not evil in my mind. And what I'm trying to say is that the greatest crown a king can wear is truthfulness. The beggar and the king. If we return to that checkpoint during the talk, if we had the beggar and the king standing beside each other on the street, imagine the king like took off his crown and came like on the street, and somehow this beggar realized this was the king. And so this beggar is standing like this on the side of a street. Imagine it's a medieval times or something, and the king is there. And imagine suddenly there's a sword fight and some person dies in front of the king. This king who was like, had never stepped out of his kingdom, out of his palace, kind of suddenly this new prince king, let's say. And so what we see is that this king gets shocked, but the beggar is undisturbed. And who is stronger in that moment? Who is standing more like a king? The person who no longer fears or reacts to chaos, it acknowledges it. It's as if, what can I do with death? Death is a mirror of life. That's it. It's a mirror of a lifetime. And what I mean by that is like death is something where the concept is meaningless because you cannot know it when you are alive. And so it is nature's call. That means it's like imagine it's like you're on a roller coaster ride. Let it go to its end. Experience the whole roller coaster ride before suddenly jumping out of the roller coaster. Life has a value. Its value is unknown. Don't just. Too many human beings are making, in some sense, unnecessary discontinuities. We must just re-evoke the mind through a new cultural and global freedom. And freedom must be attempted. And this is the unique thing. One of the most important ideas that has ever existed on this planet and is the most helpful to any branch of knowledge, any field, is the idea of parallel realities. You see, language evolves through geometry into superior states of observable communication. So language's evolution is into geometry. We think the hieroglyphics are like, wow, look at these silly pictures, but in some sense it's as if geometric code is very unique. Geometry is alien, is extraterrestrial. In a world where everything is just moving. This is why in the school of Athens, Plato, imagine, was the program director of the school of Athens, And Plato, they had guards who would guard this room, where in this room were these sacred, like 3D objects, imagine a cube, a sphere, a pyramid, and they were preserved and locked in a room in the school of Athens, and something like that. The reason why? Because the disciples, this is totally like a Platonic kind of vibe, but it's like Plato was like, these people who are studying in the school of Athens, their minds cannot take it. It's like they will go insane if they see a perfect cube, because nature is not that perfect. You see? So what I'm telling you is divinity was designed in the eyes of the being prior to the body. And the eyes, in some sense, their greatest like what they are is a moment. You see your whole moment. And it's not that you should just, like, some people are like, trust me, the moment you have one type of belief in a changing world, you suddenly become foolish. Why? Because you're trying to put everything into this one box of of language. That's the issue with beliefs. It's not important. It is the action. It is the responsibility. It is how this child opened its eyes to a world that needed mankind to arise. Efficiency must be attempted. When can it be attempted? Everything that it's like the best time to do whatever you is important to do is now always. Have you noticed that? When you do things now, you engage with an intensity of your moment where discipline can integrate properly with your memory structure. A lot of people don't study their memory, don't care about their memories. They're like, okay, whatever, man. Some moments I remember things, some other moments I don't. What do you want me to do about it? Like that's I find that's a very common mindset in the Western wave, in the Western Enlightenment wave. What I'm trying to say is that man's relationship with his world is evolving as much as the contents of his awareness are expanding. Mr. Within is saying, guys, we're telling stories to ourselves and just locking into these programs and thinking we are a certain person with a certain belief, and this is what we are. We are evolution. We are the eyes of evolution, and the eyes of evolution, even though it's like embodiment is a stepping stone. Civilization is transitioning from simply being just a group of animals moving together into being a group of minds who have understood that the sky belongs to all. That is freedom. Seek a freedom that is like the sky, and then your mind has no edge. And an edgeless mind, it is no longer disturbed by the fall. There is no longer divinity. There is no longer something that's non-divine. There is no longer a story for a world that is happening now. That's the strength that the beggar had in his eyes that the king, the kind of like Prince King, didn't have. When I say Prince King, I mean like a prince who's recently become king and doesn't know how the streets are. Something cool about your moment of being, and this is the cool thing about being human, is that a human being has a dimension of design, but also has a dimension where these designs are being expressed in certain ways. So individuality is not just what you think you are. Individuality is the depth in your eyes as you run laps around the sun in this lifetime. And we animate things. When we understand this, you will understand tolerance. You can never get angry at anyone when you realize every human being is generating value and attention in the moment. You see, it's like you cannot judge nature. You can't look at one tree and say this tree is better than another tree. How can you? It's like, when we look at trees, we don't, because they are not personalized, because they're not uniquely individualized, we're like, wow, look at the beauty of the forest. But human beings, when we look at them, we're each so personalized. It's as if every person is in a suit of their own conception. It's not Tony Stark that only made a suit, Iron Man suit. We, in some sense, every person has made a sort of egoic Iron Man suit for themselves. And be playful with it. That's all I can say. It's like, how do you get rid of the ego? Very easily. You first of all become incredibly playful, and you're like, okay, so I have these strict beliefs on life. Great. And then you kind of wonder about the other side. That's how knowledge evolves. Because you're most of the time, if you're a person with firm beliefs right now, let me tell you what's going on. Life is spread into a duality, and you're just choosing one side. You're just choosing. Free will, there's something unique about it. It can choose without knowing what it chooses, and it could say it was my free will. But that to know what it chooses must come with a self-reflection of the knower. In the Upanishads and the Vedas, we find sentences such as in the Rig Vedas. There's a sentence that says the mind is a slave to the real. And there's a sentence in the Upanishads that says, I don't know which one exactly, and I probably can't even pronounce it properly. But the Manduka Upanishad, or it's probably not that one. But in the Rig Veda, it says the mind is a slave to the unreal. And in a certain Upanishad, it says uh, the seer of sight cannot be seen. And it suddenly goes through in the passage in the Upanishads to all the different senses. The hearer of the what is being heard cannot be heard. That means there's an awareness that has nothing to do with your sensory perception, nothing to do with the actor on stage. It is the audience. The audience of your being is your consciousness. It's not your consciousness, it's your pure awareness. Then as you move in this life, you suddenly are contained. You become as individual as you move and speak. This is why individuality is spoken. That's why freedom of speech has been the greatest value. And freedom, when I looked at the Declaration of Human Rights, guys, do you know, like a part of me there were tears of joy. Because I recognized certain human beings were aware enough to care. That's the sign of intelligence. The courage and honor that makes the fireman run into a burning house and still allow life to continue. Time is the glow of a changing world. Ideas are reality can be multidimensional, and your imagination can be singular. And then in some sense, reality could be singular and your imagination can be multidimensional. And this is what we pretty much find when we look. A good example of this would be the theist and the atheist, or the secular mindset and the, in some sense, religious and mindset. And what it is various stories which are being validated by different sources. So you see, the imagination of the religious person is singular. You see, this is why there's blasphemy. If God is one, so it's like we don't need to care about our minds, just pay attention to the one. So imagination has one source. But when we have our objective body, the secular mind finds its wings open in this way, where when the objective dimension is singular, the subjective is multidimensional. What it means is that imagination is multidimensional, reality is singular. So you suddenly, into the Western society, will be fascinated by concepts of infinity, multidimensionality, parallel realities, the other, what's beyond the veil of what is seen. It's as if that we are explorers at heart, all of us. You cannot deny. It's as if, let me tell you what the villain and the superhero have in common. They both can get bored. They could just be like, why are we wearing these costumes? Like, it's not Halloween. What are we doing? Imagine, guys, like I'm pretty sure if like an enlightened extraterrestrial, if an like I'm saying this very playfully and in a kind of humorous sci-fi way, you know, if an extraterrestrial kind of advanced, enlightened, peaceful, you know, extraterrestrial species kind of civilization kind of just for a visit, they came down to earth to see what's going on, and they saw like a superhero and a supervillain fighting in the streets, these aliens would be like, okay, this is hilarious. They'd be like they'd see evolved monkeys punching one another with the different colored clothing. Like what? Like we are. Trust me, we're all actors. We're all actors, and when we wonder about how the reality is directed, it has to do with how reality is held. So self-realization. Imagine there's a cup of coffee in your hand, and uh, this cup of coffee, imagine there's a cup of coffee in your hand, but you don't know it's in your hand. And suddenly you notice there's something there. That is what I find the closest kind of pointer to what enlightenment can actually be. It is awareness, experiential awareness, realigning fixed conceptual categorization. Or a word which probably I don't think it's in the dictionary, but subjectification. I mean, it probably is, but subjective. Man, designing words is incredibly it's an art. Michelangelo has this quote, guys. He says, Michelangelo is an Italian sculptor. He's known to draw kind of the hand of God, attempting to touch the hand of man, like the finger of man. He drew this famous artwork on the Sistine Chapel. Like this dude drew something on a ceiling. Like that is next level art. That's like a next level artist in my mind, you know. Back in that day, you know. And so he was also a sculptor, and he has this saying where Michelangelo says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. That means subjective reality was manifested. Thoughts can become real and reality can become a thought. When I remember my grandfather passed in 2010. Sorry, not 2010. When I was 10 years old. When I was 10 years old, my grandfather passed away. And so he exists as a thought. That means something that was real now remains as a memory, as a thought for me. Yet, we see a person like an inventor inventing something is someone, or as Michelangelo sculpts and it's like starts sculpting an angel in the stone, he sees what is there and he lives it. So see what you are. And meditation, honestly, like just 20 minutes throughout your day, or 10 to 20 minutes, you know, minimum 10, max 20. Not max 20, but like I'll say minimum 10. Okay, 10 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes throughout the day. Just go sit somewhere in the park or around a tree or somewhere where there's nature, and just have no thought. There's no meditation, and just wonder. Wonder about what you are, what is here. And I would recommend like having a notepad of some sorts always around you. Writing is like it's just like how we have people in fit, like an athlete goes to the gym often, is physically active. In some sense, writing is keeping your mind physically active. Writing is an exercise for the mind, even speeches, because it has to be. It's an activity. An activity, as it is done, it is as the known moves through the unknown. experience realigns the story of existence. This is why I'm saying you're free before you could not be. So the pilot of consciousness navigates and reaches the end of the destination and is in the airport. And in that moment of transit to a new plane of existence, the mind of man will eventually recognize the value of humility. Even though when religion tries to tell let me tell you something. There are some incredible ideas in religious texts, regardless of their chaoticness or orderedness, just the implication of the design of those words in that sequence. Religion's attempt has been to keep the unknown alive. Science's attempt has been to keep the known alive. And both are different parts of the brain. This is why the theist and the atheist, regardless of their difference in views, are colleagues in the same building. We live for efficiency. For what else can we do? Like, seriously. Like, what else can you do in this life? You know, you keep going forward. You press play instead of resuming your life in unnecessary distress. So, think of it this way. You're alive. There's some things you know, some things you don't know. Now, start afresh, start anew, and wonder about how what you know and how what you don't know are both here. And you'll realize the greatest minds, they, in some sense, uh, paved their own way out of the illusion. I'm telling you, it's like martial arts. The martial artist can't just copy another person. The person has to discover their true art. Their intelligence must become the winds of their mind. Because the mind can animate. And for me, I entertain the ancient concept of the four elements. The four elements, kind of like you see the movie Airbender, you pretty much get it. Like the periodic, if you were a chemistry teacher like long ago, you'd pretty much have to just teach people about these four elements: earth, air, fire, water. And if there were even more interested, kind of curious students of advanced chemistry, it was the element of ether. Ether was space. So right now we feel space is empty, but in certain ancient circles, they, in some sense, they saw space as an element, but as an unknown element. So they saw, so if all the, so earth, air, fire, water, these four elements were ways the manifest world moved. And the movement of the manifest world is the echo of the subjective consideration. When your attention realizes it is not a thought, it realizes it is the God of what it sees. So there is a sort of self-effulgence. There is something incredible about life and how it is free. And sometimes when life is too free, you think it's a simulation. Anytime you're pushed to the extreme through the cultural collective agreement, you'll see it's like you're going to think it's a simulation. Anything you don't have control over, you feel you've lost, so you think it's empty. But the thing is, you must bring control, but you must also have this control directed by an honest appreciation of life. Like something, it, like, you know, it took us 4 billion years to evolve into minds that could wander beyond evolution. This humanity is a science project which must be respected. I mean, come on. Like, what did our ancestors live for? You know, it's like, did your ancestors live, you know, like there's, it's like our ancestors lived for our greatness. And we must live for the greatness of our children's 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 children and beyond. We must allow efficient programs to create a network where the greatest ideas all over the planet can find themselves in one room, and not in one room. The room is thanks to as some people say, the internet is the nervous system of a sort of nervous system for the species, for the minds of people. You know, it's as if it's all connected to the mind of humanity. This mind of humanity, it's something where your knowledge is contributing to it in an unknown way. So it doesn't matter what a person says. This is why I feel like no person can judge any other person. We can appreciate their expressions and judge the expressions, the effects of the person, but you can never judge the cause. Because the cause is the eyes of that person, which we don't have access to. And the eyes of the mind are the truths a person has. Because those truths are agreements and authorizations with various ways the world has been sculpted into a condition. As the pilot of consciousness navigates beyond the language threshold, the plane of existence is no longer dualistic, because the axis of language is duality. The axis of the world of words is duality. And so, pretty much the greatest efficient technologies and systems that I find, for now, of course, these are this moment's ideas, guys, I'm sharing, but like, I feel civilization's efficiency is in its vision. What we see will be our fate. How we see things will be our fate, will be our destiny, will be the outcome of the opportunity or not. There was when the mind is given a sort of freedom, when you find yourself in a sort of state where there is no resistance against any manifest phenomena or subjective consideration of manifest phenomena, you see it's like once the ripples of the pond settle, the secrets of the sky are revealed. I feel this is the thing with the educational system. I personally have considered that, and this is a book I'm, in some sense, it's something I've written, where the book is called An Evolutionary Return to Nature. It is unpublished for now, but it's my kind of observation of civilization and humanity and various cultural constructs, and how I feel we are so trying to get our desires. It's as if man, Friedrich Nietzsche said, man killed God. You know, it's like God is dead and man killed him. That's what Friedrich Nietzsche said. And what that means is that when man killed God, he became God. He became God. What that means is he chose to no longer see truth outside of itself. That is the free will's urge. So when man no longer saw the unknown outside of himself, he saw it within himself. And when he saw the unknown within himself, he felt lost. He felt knowledge was sandwiched between two unknowns, you know? The unknown chaotic inspiration of the world and the unknown ordered inspiration of the world. A beggar once asked the king, who was walking on the street with his entourage, he's like, "Hey king, can I wear your crown? Can I try out your crown?" And the king looked at the beggar and he's like, "No." And the beggar looked at the king and said, "You're no king." And what I'm trying to say is that the subjective position, business negotiations is all about how quick the person can realize the subjective position of the partner or the person they're having the negotiation with. It's all about what Henry David Thoreau kind of narrows it down to. It's not what you're looking at that matters. It's what you see. That seeing, which is not just what you're looking at, which is just what matter is. It is the seer's presence. When I say seer, I'm spelling it SEER. You know, the seer of thought, the awareness of how intelligence is contained objectively and subjectively, and the objective realm and the subjective realm, and the objective life and the subjective life are two sides of the same coin. They are two aspects of the moment. They are an evolutionary achievement which has bowed to the unknown. Somebody came up to Socrates and said, "Socrates, please tell me, what is truth? What is wisdom? What is knowledge? What is all this?" And Socrates said, "The only wisdom is to know that you know nothing, because that is when you will be free to see more. That is when you will be free. When you see it's beyond your not just your reality but your imagination as well. You become humble. That's when divinity finds you. You don't find divinity. That's when in some sense you don't even have the thought of a spirit or anything, any metaphysical notion. You're just living. You are embracing the simplicity, and then the complexity finds you. As if the person ran after a butterfly. It's like, "Man, this butterfly, I'm always a step behind. What is this? I can't catch this butterfly." And I mean, of course, when I was young in my cottage in Iran, me and my brother would catch butterflies like it was easy. It's not as hard as like the stories say, the ancient quotes say. But in some sense, the idea is that when you chase something, your mind's design and mindset is that you are behind. You see? And when you chase an identity of yourself in the future, which the education system so blindly promotes, it's as if you have given a weapon to a child and sent him into a world where they don't know who the enemy is. Trust me, history is very emotional. Like, I don't know how, like, if somebody reads a history book, you know, in one night, just tries to read like a giant history book, I would say you don't know how to read a history book, you know? Because when you read that history book, and if it's truly animating for you what could have happened, then you would have a response. That's when emotions arise. For me, the sign of life is an emotional vitality where the person's mind feels free enough to be what it is, but not blind enough to enforce what it has to be. Language is the game we're playing. Language is our Iron Man suits, you know. Yet technology must be used. So for me, I have no intention of telling people free yourself from the shackles of your ego. You know, it's like I have no intention. It's like the ego is not a prison. It, even though it is a limited function of your intelligence, it's just like you choosing to be. It's like just like okay, imagine every day, like you wore a Superman like outfit every day. You'd at some point be like, okay, this is too long. I'm wearing this, you know. So what I'm saying is you would change, and that change requires a new self, for there is new data that is being animating the so think of it this way. The environment, the person, like right now, if I was to kind of identify where I am, I'm on the balcony of my house. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is that the environment defines where I am, and based on where I am, what I am is being identified, or how I'm being to be what I am. So, what I'm saying is that it's like the environment influences, is being a part of your personality. This is why it doesn't matter how many roses you have in your hand. If you're standing beside a dumpster, you won't just smell roses, you know. So that's the situation. The environment is being a part of your thinking, whether you like it or not. So you have to be aware of it. And you have to be aware you're not a thought, because the environment can lie to you. And that's what the world is. It is like waking up constantly from a dream where you saw the world in one way, then another and another, you know. So there are these kind of, I guess, views that can be shared. I just feel there needs to be a parallel allowance for civilization to wonder, for the greatest minds on this planet, which is 8 billion, you know, and growing, you know. Every mind is an angle of the world that can contribute. That's why I'm saying it's like we don't understand, but every species, at least most species, we see they move in groups. And now technology and the internet is giving us an allowance to have our minds move as groups. Do you see? So it's as if the efficiency, you see a group of birds flying in a kind of rhythmic manner. You see, you know, a school of fish kind of all going to school in the same way. So what I'm saying is like there's a sort of aligned collective movement. And once this is found, then you will love your species. Then you will realize why our ancestors lived. They lived to somehow feel that we would live. You're already in the most divine temple that could exist, the cosmos. You know, your moment is sacred. No, it's like it doesn't matter if you go in a temple, it doesn't matter if you're like in your backyard, it doesn't matter where you are, your moment, the intelligence's presence is the divinity. And as I've said before, Your existence is the proof of your divinity. It is the value. Guys, I don't do this often, and but and I can't explain why I'm saying this mantra right now. I mean, I can, but it's like it's not the way I want to. There's a sort of unique mantra that came to me in a dream where the idea of the pilots of consciousness came out of. Okay? And it is this notion that sound and attention to the instantaneous generation of sound is an activation of attention, as if attention suddenly, the dualities are transparent. And then comes like it's shocking waves of collective memories, as if you don't just access your memories, you access the memories of the field of intelligence that we have all walked in or opened our eyes in. It's like the drop can, it's like there's this incredible, again, Persian poet. I mean, honestly, he has a nice quote. This man named Attar has this quote where he says, the ocean is the ocean, regardless of the drop's philosophy. Leader to the pilots of consciousness. You are a moment present among all moments. The experience of existence is like life then becomes adventurous, but through your own eyes, not through the eyes of others who you, it's like when you have a belief that didn't generate from your experiences, you're pretty much wearing somebody else's glasses. That's what happens. That's what blind belief is. You're trying to see things as somebody who you could never see like. And that is just the nature of reality. There is a isolated thinking subject, as Rene Descartes would say. This isolated thinking subject is as isolated as the boundaries of isolation and the embodiment of language, as Hegel pointed out, which is, again, a dependency on the individual collective dynamic. Philosophy is kind of like studying the architecture of reality and imagination as they emerge through the intelligence of one moment. It's as if philosophy's true contribution to humanity was that it opened the eyes of the mind. And imagination has been reduced. It has been like kind of smashed into a pulp, made into a pulp. That's what imagination has happened in today's society. People feel a loop, a routine is more liberating than a journey to new lands. And if you physically can't travel, and of course I hope one day the civilization realizes the value of allowing, I had this idea that in the global community there should emerge this, like all educational systems all around the world are connected to this kind of like collective organization called the one student mind. And actual students are given incredible freedom to travel, to study in whatever country. They can be, of course, we are so far from that society-wise, because we have, nations have borders. We have not broken the walls yet. The Berlin Wall was broken, but the borders of nations, it has not. It's like as if we can never be conceptually touched. Now, the reason is, of course, we need to have different boxes to contain different things, but at the same time, let us give the children of humanity a great opportunity. It's like we have to, this is pretty much what we can do, guys. We plant trees in which we're not going to be sleeping under. And these trees, they're not there to try to conquer the world. It is only the conquered that feel the need to conquer. There's no human being that without that data first coming in, it's as if, trust me, a child's evil and good nature has to do with the first, how consciousness came, and how the child became conscious, and in what emotional level it became conscious. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I gotta head out. I might do a part 3 to this. Much blessings and